Warning, due to some language and subject matter, listener discretion is advised.
In all my years on this earth, I have never known a single person that has chosen to get married with the intent on that marriage failing. Yet the divorce rate for first-time marriages is currently sitting at 49%. What is the root cause of this escalated number? Are there gender-specific roles that cause this number to increase? And what influence has social media had over the current divorce rate? It's an uncomfortable set of questions, but something I hope my next guest can help us answer. Joining me on the podcast today is Terrie Vanover. She is a divorce strategist and proprietor of the website choosingtorise.com. We're going to share some stories and hopefully make the holiday season of 2021 a little easier on everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Caught on the Mic. Terrie Vanover, how the heck are you?
I'm awesome.
Are you guys ready for Christmas?
We are traveling, so we'll have to get everything pre-done. And the good news is with all the shipping and everything, it makes it easier. So we're almost ready. We did our cookies last weekend, and then next weekend my kids are with my ex-husband. So it does make it a little bit, we have to kind of pre-do a lot of holiday things and plan ahead. I'm so excited for the season though.
It's like we rehearsed this because you kind of teed off the topic of this particular episode of the show because I'm doing the same exact thing. Shared parenting, split parenting time where you're just kind of looking at those schedules and you're like, okay, we do an exchange on this day. We're going to do our Christmas on this day. Mom's going to do her Christmas on that day. And everybody's happy, but it's all for the kids, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I cannot wait to talk about like co-parenting and divorce baggage and all that good stuff. And I'm so excited to be here with you, Mike. I just cannot thank you enough. I've been listening to your podcast and I've just been loving it, enjoying the energy. And I'm so excited to be here. I feel like I'm like one of the cool kids now. I'm like, I'm in the cool kids club.
I think you and I have been talking for the better part of the year off and on trying to make this happen. I think since early spring even.
And I love how we had that like understanding between us with the blended families, like, look, and you were like, these are the days I have my kids. And I'm like, these are the days I have mine. So how can we, because I get it though. Like I get the priority, so it's like, so I'm glad we were able to make this happen.
Well, you've always been one of the cool kids as far as I can tell. So here's an opportunity. Here's your opportunity to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do.
Okay. So I am a divorce strategist who helps divorce professionals navigate the overwhelm and avoid mistakes that leave them emotionally, financially, and legally devastated. But just as importantly, I show people how to heal from their divorce baggage and trauma so that they can go forward in this new chapter and have happy, healthy relationships with themselves and with their exes and with their future relationships.
Fantastic. So what brought you onto that path?
I love this question. So I got to give a little bit of background, and you probably hear my accent. That's usually the first question people are like, where are you from? So I grew up just, a poor country girl from Virginia. My mom was a single mom. She had, 2 little girls and she didn't have much of an education, we didn't have much in terms of like money. And my biological father was, I think we call it a functioning alcoholic today. And he definitely chose alcohol over us. And what little visitation that we had was, I would say, negative, the few visits that we had. So I had a lot of abandonment issues. I had a lot of shame from being poor and, not having enough. And I was sexually abused as a child by a family member. And all of this childhood trauma really bled into my adulthood. I felt insecure, not enough, unlovable. And where this particularly showed up was in my marriage. I have to confess, I was not a good wife. I was needy. I was insecure. I was controlling, because it'll really lead to a lot of control issues. And I really just was an unending pit that could not get enough love. I really don't feel like there's anything that my ex-husband could have done, that would have made me really happy, because I had a lot of unresolved issues. And within a few short years, here I was a single mom, divorced with 2 very young children, repeating my mother's pattern. And I lost everything in my divorce. I made the mistakes that everyone makes, that most people make, should say. I lost my home. I lost all my financial security. I lost family and friends. I made, huge mistakes as far as like the legal, navigating that process, which ended up, bankrupting me. And then I lost my mom, my support system. I lost my health because I was hit by a van while riding my bike one day, and just continued down this downward spiral. And it was like the darkest time of my life. But I will say I don't regret it for a minute, because it did lead me to this path of healing, helping others and serving others, because it was really kind of like, I know you probably hear this on the podcast a lot. It's your awakening. You kind of have to go through the darkness to experience the awakening. And it was in that loneliness, and recognizing that this loneliness that I felt both during my marriage and post divorce, that was still like eating me alive, that I was like, okay, sister, you have got to deal with this. You've got to work through this, because this is, you're just damaging lives, wrecking your own life and everyone else in the process. And so the good news is I learned, practical tools, actionable tools to like heal my traumas, learn how to navigate the process better, help people with, resources, knowledge, information that you need that most people don't know about going through divorce. And, just now I'm on this really path of healing, and, I live a fulfilled life. I feel so free and content and at peace. And what I'm most proud of is how my personal life has really turned around. I'm remarried to a fantastic man who happens to be New York Italian, my sexy New York Italian. So between his accent and my accent, the kids have a field day, if you can imagine. And we've expanded our family. We've got a little baby girl, and now I co-parent with my ex, which if you had told me during the divorce, like we were here baking cookies on Sunday. If you had told me that, like, I would have looked at you and like, you've been taking something, because that ain't going to happen, because we hated each other just like most people who are going through divorce. And my goal is to help other people get to that relationship where, they have, if not love and affection, at least appreciation and respect for their ex. And, even his new wife is like, she's one of my best friends. We share things and help each other and support each other. And I don't know how people do it when they constantly are in conflict. And look, I'm not saying it's completely possible in every single situation. I know that it's sometimes healthier to have healthy boundaries. I'm like a badass bitch when it comes to boundaries. So I'm not saying it's like healthy in every situation, but I will say it's possible in more situations than people recognize. If they know the tools, if they know some things to let go, if they know how to communicate better. So I do think it's possible.
There are a few things that kind of struck me really hard while you were telling your story, and it's the direct parallels to my own life.
Mm-hmm.
I am a child of divorce. I was out on my own by the time I was 16. My mother gave up all legal custodial rights to my brothers and I when I was 12. I did not see my mom between the time I was 12 and I was 21. I didn't have any sort of relationship with her whatsoever. So, of course, that led to a lot of conflicting relationships in my own life. There are some other parallels in your story that has strike some people that are really close to me. I can't disclose who, but it's crazy because when we're going through divorce, we tend to think we're the only one. We tend to like kind of associate it with, I hate to say this, and this is not a knock on anybody's sense of spirituality, but kind of the shame that has been brought about through, some organized religions and, societal expectations, where it's like, well, if I'm getting divorced, I'm a lesser person, which is not the case, which kind of brings me to a few statistics that I think are really interesting. And I'm going to round the numbers up and down just for the sake of discussion, but 50% of first marriages end in divorce. 60% of second marriages end in divorce. 75% of third marriages end in divorce. A divorce happens once every 13 seconds in the United States, which equals about 2.4 to 2.5 million divorces per year. Now, issues like custody and children kind of create the exponents of stress that come with that. And there's some other interesting statistics that I'll share probably later in the episode in regards to how social media has impacted those divorce rates, but it's common.
Agree.
So, so like whenever you're working with somebody, what is it exactly? What is your process?
So it's a customized process. And the way I work is I am trained in, multiple modalities. So it makes it more accessible. And one of the things people say about me, and I consider this a compliment, like, oh my God, you are so direct. I have a sugary, Southern accent, but don't be fooled, because I will tell you some shit. Like, oh, I got to call you out on your bullshit. And I think that's kind of a lot of problems with traditional talk therapy. Is just, you just go in there and you talk about your feelings and which is great. I'm not saying there isn't a healing space for that. And I don't provide, I definitely provide that space of healing and, validation and support. But there's also the people that come to me, feel like therapy has left them stuck, and they want conscious, intentional exercises and strategies that are going to lead them to a much more healed place, a much more aligned place. So usually my programs are, 6 months, and we, develop strategies. And again, it all starts with that, just like what you just said. I mean, I, tell people on the very first, phone call, I'm like, oh, it's this, this, and this. And I could tell how your abandonment shows up like this, this, and this, because like you said, with your mother giving up her rights, you would definitely have that's horrendous for a adolescent boy to be, taken away from his mom or feel like she's left him. And so that leaves you with a lot of wounds, and that those tend to show up on in your intimate relationships, because we use our intimate relationships to try to fill those childhood wounds. And that was definitely me. And so I take people through the process of healing those childhood wounds, because they show up in their current relationships. And the amazing thing is when you heal that, it then miraculously all the other stuff heals as well. Then you start showing up differently in every other relationship that you're in. There's the ex that triggered you no longer triggers you. The toxic woman that you've been attracting over and over and over, you're like, why do I keep attracting these crazy ladies, crazy women? And it's like, oh, there you go. Let's develop some healthy boundaries. Let's look at those red flags and why you're attracting them, the root of that, and then deal with that. And then you start attracting a higher quality partner and people in your life, just in all areas of your life. So I also want to kind of round back. It'll be interesting to see about that first marriage statistic, because it actually had gone down from 30% even into the 20s pre-COVID. Yes. And then we saw a huge spike during COVID with marriages struggling, which I know you kind of have these really great people on the podcast that probably speak to this, is because we use work as a distraction. We use those activities as a distraction. And the foundation of these relationships have been broken for a long time, but we no longer could escape that. And we were confronted, or many people were confronted with this crumbling relationship and could no longer deny it. So it wasn't that, oh, COVID caused all these relationships to fail or whatever. I think it just unveiled what was already
right
between people. I mean, for many people, they came closer, and to navigate a challenging time, it brought them closer. So, and then the other statistic that I really throw out, because I think this is the most important reason to work on yourself post-divorce, pre-divorce, during divorce, is that, in a blended family, it is like every stressor, challenge. And then it's just, I always say, like, I would rather get hit by that van again than become a stepmom again. Like that, those first couple of years were agony. And I have tools, and I have every kind of like toolkit in the box, and I have support from like amazing coaches and amazing people. So it's, so I can't imagine the average person who has all those stressors. So this latest statistic I saw was like close to 70% if you have kids. And I think it's because you're still bringing in your relationship baggage, but add on all the personalities, add on like a high conflict ex that you never really, dealt with and learned how to do that in the first place. And then you got, your relationship with your spouse, and they're getting the vent of all your angst and anger, and it's a lot. As you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I am remarried, and we are a blended family. And coincidentally enough, and I've mentioned it a million times on the podcast, I now have 3 15-year-old daughters, twin stepdaughters that are 15, and my daughter's 15. And my poor son, he's 12. And gosh.
Yeah, Lord. Yeah. It's a lot.
You're absolutely correct. I think my wife now and I, we did do work in between our first and second marriages. And I think when we do fight, it's typically something involving the children. And
yeah, same here with my husband. I'd say most of the time. Yeah.
Right. And then stepping back to the divorce statistics, I did kind of glaze over the fact that in 2019, that divorce rates had hit their lowest rate in 50 years pre-COVID, and then spiked back up post-COVID.
Your statistic you mentioned the social media. And again, yes. It's all about us, the loneliness that we feel, but it's compounded by the fact that we have a device in our hand 24/7 that can give us instant stimulus. And we never take time to reflect and just sit with our emotions, sit with our feelings. That was maybe that was the blessing for me, was that this was it wasn't even that long ago, but before social media and phones. Gosh, it wasn't even that long ago. Oh my gosh, technology has exploded. But I remember, I was sitting in this strange, because I lost my house. I was sitting in this strange woman's basement crying night after night after night. And it was during that loneliness when I kind of came to the realization that, girl, you have been filling yourself up with some external, looking for attention from men, and and it's not working, and it's time to do something different. But if I hadn't sat in that loneliness, I would have never had that realization. And so a big part of my work is like journaling and sitting with your feelings and meditating. And I know people have this whole like woo-woo like meditation. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm a stepmom of 5. Like, it is not woo-woo. It is like, it is a must tool. It's a self-care tool, just like my workouts. And it's the same thing. It's that emotional muscle. I use the analogy of like, you got to be physically healthy. And in order to become stronger, you've got to lift those weights, and they've got to be bigger and heavier. And you have to become uncomfortable. And the discomfort is where we gain the strength. And it's the same way with your emotional muscle. You got to sit with those uncomfortable feelings. And as you do, the muck shit rises, and you go, oh, that's what that is. That's where that comes from. Let me deal with it and let me move on. So I call it like, on the other side of pain is your peace. And on the other side of fear is freedom. If you're willing to take a look at that. And people today are not, and our phones give us easy access to instant validation on social media and instant gratification. We're not turning to our partners. We're turning to, it is a big deal. I see, particularly, you know what? I see it more with the men complain about it, about their wives. My wife she lost interest in me and went to the social media. And I think instead of dealing with the issues in the marriage, I think many women go to Instagram.
Right. Yeah. I kind of think it's one of those things where normally in life, the laws of attraction are a good thing. But since the advent of social media, it almost kind of has reversed engineered itself to where it's become a bad thing, because people are looking at other people's lives or what they're putting forth as the image of their life and kind of having this sense of envy to a certain degree, where a lot of people are like, they get that ex-girlfriend from high school that all of a sudden friend requests them out of the blue someplace, or the ex-boyfriend from high school. I mean, it goes both ways. And you almost see somebody trying to fill the gaps in their lives. Like people, you can almost watch social media, you watch your Facebook feed, watch the Instagram feed, and almost watch people telegraph the fact that they are on the verge of separation, bordering on divorce, because just like you said, they're looking to fulfill something. And that's what the instant gratification of social media provides for those people. They say, and this is the actual statistic, that 20% Facebook account increases correlated to a 2.2 to 4.32 divorce rate increase. That's big whenever you're looking at numbers and you're looking at how many people are using social media. And that's just Facebook.
Yes. Yeah. That is an interesting statistic. And you're right. I'd be interested to see the Instagram. And I had a friend who moved to California like recently. I'm in the Chicago area, which is very you're in Midwest too. So, it's just very like down to earth, like just very, I don't know. It's just very accessible. People here are just like super down to earth. And she moved to LA. Maybe I shouldn't say this, but she was telling me the difference and how people like particularly on social media, because we were talking about something in our business and moms and so, something. I was like, well, did you join the group, a Facebook group for moms, over where you're, your local? And she was like, oh my gosh, it is the fakest. I was like, yeah, I know what you're talking about, because you see some of those Facebook groups that are like so particularly phony and, just idealized and not a real family. And I totally can see it. And it can be, it makes you feel bad about yourself if that's all you're seeing. Those portraits where everyone looks perfect and they look like models and they've, got these photo shoots. And instead of, it's not a practical view of life. And I'm so naive. I don't watch a lot of news. I don't, do a whole lot of that stuff. And I had sent my sister like some post or something of my kids doing something. They were eating this huge sundae or something really silly, like kind of over the top. And the kids were all like posing. They look super cute and everything. And my sister texts me back and she goes, yeah, throw it in the garbage and post it on Instagram like those moms do. And I was like, what? What are you talking about? And she said, there's those Instagram moms. They stage these photo shoots with their kids, but they're not actually like going swimming. They're just getting in their swimsuits and posing, or they're going on the, trip to the store. And I was like, oh my God, and I'm like, this is terrible. Like, I can't imagine just taking that sundae and like throwing it away in their face. I was like, I guess it is. It's more important to get the picture than it is to really create an authentic memory.
Yeah, there's a perception versus reality kind of issue out there for sure. They say right now that 1 in 3 divorces has had a social media related issue as the root cause of why the divorce occurred. And this is just something recent. This is something within the past 5 years. Definitely.
It goes right to what you said. Some ex-girlfriend is, you've got one of the partners or both partners are lonely. Their needs aren't getting met. And then someone gives them attention. And it's just easy access to, where people, and again, it's even just like emotional betrayal. It doesn't have to be a physical betrayal,
Right.
but when you start sharing things with someone and, about your relationship, or you start sharing things on a very deep, intimate level, you've broken that bond with your partner. So it's really the easy access. Again, I think you're right. It's that validation too. Like, people are getting so much external validation that maybe they're not getting in their real life and in their real marriage. So they can get it outside of themselves. But it doesn't solve the problem. You end up right back with yourself. You still end up by yourself.
Exactly. With what you do, in regards to what you do, what are some of the root issues that are you see happen more frequently that actually cause the divorce?
Probably a hidden, I would say a hidden epidemic in America. I would say alcoholism. At this point, I'm not shocked, but in the beginning, like every third phone call, again, these tend to be mainly women that are leaving their husbands who have an alcohol issue. And I've been surprised, like when I was, wow, like I would have never guessed. It's just a hidden epidemic. And I think COVID, again, I think that contributed to it, because people had nothing to do. They're bored, nowhere to go, nothing to do. They got to numb themselves, right? I've never been able to kind of run that statistic on. And again, it's one of those things people don't like, oh, I'm divorcing my alcoholic spouse. Like, it's kind of people don't want to, like, again, divorce itself is taboo. And then you throw in all these other issues and people don't want to be open about it.
You almost get one primary issue, but really it's the culmination of several secondary issues.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think people will say my ex, cheated on me. He's a cheater. It's a cheater. She was a cheater.
Right.
But the truth is, like, there are some other foundational things that are broken long before it gets to that point. And it is a complex, complicated situation. And even betrayal can be overcome. Any challenge, I'm not saying it's, necessary for everyone or healthy for everyone, but if the couple's willing to do the work and they're willing to face those demons and become accountable for their actions, then it is salvageable. So yeah, that seems to be the accepted, like, okay, I got divorced for that. But I mean, we need to make divorce more acceptable. And I also think the whole like toxic relationship, like that label has been like thrown around a lot. I think, and I've talked to other like experts too, where, it can be two people who in and of themselves are not toxic, but when they get around each other, they bring out the toxicity in each other for whatever reason. Their qualities tend to draw out the negative in each other, and it makes that relationship toxic. And they can be two great people on their own. So that's a term and then the narcissist term is probably the one that I'm exhausted from and way overused, way overused.
Leaning into exactly what you just said on those 2 points in particular, there's four items: money, sex, status, and biological clock are 4 things that people rush into marriage for. They marry for money, they marry because the sex is good, they marry because the social status is right, or they marry quickly because the biological clock is ticking, without really figuring out if they're actually compatible or not. A lot of times they don't find out until it's too late, right?
Yes. Yeah. And I think people really need to take time and just learn who you are, identify who you are, and work on yourself. And I know that term, like, date yourself, gets thrown around a lot. And like, what does that mean? Date myself to the movies? Like, not necessarily, but treat yourself the way you're longing for someone else to treat you. Because again, it all goes to like that worthiness. I am worthy of love. I'm worthy of attention. I'm worthy of unconditional acceptance. But you have to give it to yourself before you can get, expect it from anyone else, or before you can give it to anyone else. Because if you don't really love and accept and have done the work on yourself, it's going to definitely manifest in a relationship. So yeah, it's definitely important to take time. And a big thing that I teach my clients is to understand that sometimes the attraction, and if it's a really quick attraction, it's coming from that childhood wound, because it's like we're drawn to that person because they're filling that need within us that we didn't get from mom, for example. There's one where I had a client and she was seeing the red flags, and we talked about it like, girl, you're a data collector. How much data do you need? How many red flags do you need to keep putting in that box before you've seen the signs, like what's going on? And when we did the work together, we realized that what it was he made her feel accepted. He made her feel comfortable in her authentic self, which she didn't as in an adoptive family. She never quite felt like one of them. So in that feeling, she was drawn to him, couldn't seem to break that bond. But when she recognized that and did the inner work on herself, she was able to break that bond. And another thing that people need to realize, and I know you talk about this a lot on your podcast, is like, there's that book, Fuck Feelings, right? Like if feelings are fleeting. You can't just, you've got to, when you're on a date with someone or when you're dating just in general, you've got to look at, do their words match their actions? Do you see like a discrepancy there? Because that's a huge, like, that's what you should really be looking for, not about how they make you feel. Because, people can make you feel really good about yourself, throw in the compliments, but you notice like, this person really doesn't have it all together, and they're, financially like really, unstable, and they can't handle their money. They can't, again, that's a red flag. All these like things that we tend to dismiss, real important to take your time, do the inner work, understand yourself really, really well, and recognize your patterns, because they're going to show up in your relationships.
And you almost have to make sure that your life goals are kind of in sync as well. And you have to have that common understanding that a relationship is not a 50-50 thing. It's a 100-100 thing. And sometimes it's got to be 180-20 thing. It's the law of 200% realistically, because two people each bringing in 100%. You got to be able to fill in the gaps if the other person can't at that particular moment in time. And people are going to have moments, right?
Absolutely. And one of the things that, my husband and I do, kind of similar to what this, because I talk about that too, like 50-50 is like a total myth. Like there's like no such thing. And I think too, with gender roles being also less kind of rigid as they were, we have to discuss that, and we have to understand that it's not 50-50. That's not what it is. That, some days it's 80-20, or like you said, 180-20. And some days it's like, now you're making me do math. And then, 70-30 or whatever. But it's just to understand that there's an ebb and flow to a relationship. And what we do consciously in our relationship is like, we kind of have like these, marriage meetings. And in December, my husband and I had a couple of meetings, and I said, here's what I got going on this month, and here's where I need your support, and we've like, the kids are older, and we kind of incorporate them. And I was so proud of my son. He came to me this week or late last week, and he was like, I've got all these summatives, Mom. I'm just going to let you know, I'm going to be anxious. I'm going to be in my room a lot studying. I was like, awesome. Like, I love that you came to us and you told us what you need. You need space and you need time, and we totally understand. So I would, want people to do that, is to really make that, I call it make those conscious decisions every day in your marriage to show up, to support the relationship and support each other and support yourself. You have to be an individual. Right. Like you said, it's 100. Everyone has to be an individual in the relationship, and you have to fulfill your own self. And that's a big thing. Will Smith is going around, that big thing that he said about, like, I'm not there to make Jada happy. Like, I realize I can't do that. She's got to make her own happiness. I got to make my own happiness. And then we just come together and we bring even more happiness to each other. And that's really the key. And I think And I think that's a big myth about marriage. I mean, there's a lot of myths about marriage. I'm sure we could do a whole other episode on the myths of marriage.
Right.
Because like people think like the other, it's like those fairy tales we've been fed. And like, no one should ever like need another person. You should wake up every day choosing that person over and over and over. Every day I choose you, I don't have to. And that's a great feeling.
You hit something I was going to hit on later, and that's gender roles. And, our generation being late Gen X, early millennial, the Zennial generation, if you will, we're supposed to be the generation that broke the cycle to a certain degree. But what we did is we rewrote the book. And as far as gender equality goes, in light of that, a lot of research has shown that men are typically intimidated when a woman's career takes off, but at the same time, women are empowered, and the divorce rate for women that have filed divorce increases by 33% when a woman gets a promotion at a job.
Yes. Now that's a complex statistic. I think it seems like it's, simple, like, oh, you make more money, you're going to get a divorce. I don't think that's it. I think that marriages where a partner was unhappy, as soon as the woman had the financial stability to get out, she then could use that opportunity. I think that's a big part of it. And I think that is a huge reason why so many women stay in unhappy marriages, because they don't have the financial ability to make it on their own. They've been a stay-at-home mom for 20 years, and it's very difficult to start over. So I do think gender roles are making it more difficult, which is all the more reason, like I say, like there's got to be really good communication, and there needs to be some intentional setting of goals together as a couple. And again, if a man is triggered by his wife, making more, why is that? Like, let's get curious. Like, let's dig into that rather than glossing it over, pretending it's not going on. Like, okay, what's going on there? Is it that you're fearful? Again, it might be your own abandonment issues showing up, and you're worried she's going to leave you because now she's got the means to do so. And so the thing is, the funny thing about control is the more you try to control people, the more they resist and the more they want out, and, the more you loosen those reins and just love and accept them, the more they're going to stay. So really important to understand your own self. And I will say also too, Mike, I use this a lot. I talk about this a lot. Money is never about money. It always signifies something else. And that's a crucial thing for couples to understand. I was working with a couple recently, and I said, okay, what does money mean to you? And for many people, money means safety, security, stability. You'd be surprised, and I see this a lot in men, where money means freedom and pleasure, but it's that whole freedom, right? And so that's why I think there's a resistance to this. Well, I think there's a couple of reasons. For spousal support, when men have to pay their ex-spousal support, I think it has to do with that freedom. Like, you're taking away my freedom. You're taking away, I feel controlled. And then another reason I think is also it's a tie to someone that they wish they could break. And it's a reminder every month that I'm a failure. And I also think that men in particular are really sensitive to shame. And so that whole, thing of like, I'm a failure, I didn't make it, she rejected me, it all goes to that shame. So I think spousal support is like one of those big, like, hot button things.
It's almost like I led you to the water on that one. So virtual high five. That was my intent. But yeah, I wholeheartedly agree, because again, going back to where the thought started, women need a sense of security before they can exit a marriage. So they try and keep the marriage together for the sake of that security, where men typically try and keep the marriage together for a sake of involvement in their families' lives, because we could do a whole other episode about family courts and the lopsided family. I could speak to that for days. But
we still, it's interesting about the gender roles, right? Like how that has flip-flopped. But when it comes to parenting, there's still this notion that it's just mothers are better parents automatically. That's, like, well, why are we not valuing fathers and their role in their children's lives? So that is an interesting, we've come a long way in a lot of ways, but not in that way.
Yeah, it's the tender years doctrine that had been put in place, and it started to kind of dissolve in the late 80s, and courts are really slow, but they're finally starting to understand the value of shared parenting and aligned parenting, 50-50 time, as opposed to, like, you had a divorce in, like, say, 1989, and you were a man. You were lucky if you got your kids every other week and maybe for dinner on the off week.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yes.
But now it's a lot more aligned, because they're looking at the fact that 2 out of every 5 children growing up are growing up without fathers in their lives.
It's sad. And like I said, as someone who's been abandoned by her biological father, it leaves wounds. And again, it's a generational trauma. We just, continue to pass it on and on and on. Right. And so I think if we can, and that's another thing, I would, if you can stay out of the courts and make these decisions for your family, it's for the best. Try, because when you do that, you're going to lose control, and it's a gamble. And is that a gamble you're willing to take? We try some alternative routes first. Alternative routes to get what you want, to continue to do the things you want. Now, I'm not saying it's not always, it's not always possible, but if you can use some alternative means to develop that parenting time, it's better than just having the courts decide.
There's a good argument to be made that because of the court systems, that our economy is kind of structured for a very pro-divorce environment.
Yeah, I mean, it's built on the foundation of discourse. And the more you don't agree, the better it is for the courts and for the lawyers and for the system, but not for the families that it's supposedly serving. So it's not really serving the families, because if it was restructured so that one partner had a divorce coach to help them navigate the emotional side, and another partner had a divorce coach to help them, and then they had some financial people and they had some real estate people as well as attorneys, like helping them to figure out how to best, divide the assets. And that would be a far better, way of serving families, right? It's set up as this adversarial system. It's not really meant to like keep the parenting together or keep kids in a co-parenting situation. They want that. I mean, they advocate for that, but the system itself doesn't always lend itself to do that.
And that leads me into my next question, because you're labeled as a divorce strategist, which I love that term, because I think a lot of times people have already made their decision before they go to a marriage counselor.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, I've gone through the process of marriage counselors. I am soured on that process. I'm not opposed to counselors at all, but I do have this apprehension with marriage counselors where I do believe a lot of them are a racket and sometimes actually make the problems worse by exposing it or supplementing ideas that weren't there before going into the counselor. Have you experienced that or heard that before?
I think it's tough. I think it's a tough position because I don't do marriage counseling,
Right, exactly.
I think it can be a tough position to be in. And I think one of the reasons is I think it's set up for the couple to fail. I think there should be a meeting in the outset that says, look, here's what we're here to do. And here's the intention. And we need to have a goal. This is not come in here and you're the victim of your spouse and we blame everything on the other partner. And I think that might be why like my process is different. And even the process of coaching is slightly different because every time you're coming in, there's a goal. There is a plan you're walking away with. And like, if the goal is, okay, we want to communicate better. Okay, you're going to have to hit some hard truths about like what that is, but like, give some actionable strategies so people can communicate better rather than just, bring. I think someone like, I don't made this analogy of like, sometimes it can be like just unpacking a suitcase and then you're just stuck there with like all your clothes all over the floor. Now you've just brought all of this, your dirty laundry out into the light. And now what do you do? But if you have someone that's skilled enough to know, how can we pack this up and put this in the suitcase and roll this in a nice bundle so that you guys can walk out of here and be like a team? I think people forget, like, you're a team. You're supposed to be working through this together. And how can you best support each other and give people like actionable goals and actionable exercises to do? And there's really great exercises and there's really great research that says what makes a relationship successful. And it's not what you think it is. Like, it's like super like, right. It's super like, hey, here you go, Mike. Don't ignore your spouse. That's like number one. Like, Gottman Institute, which is the leading research on marriages. Like, the number one thing is like, he calls them bids. Like when you look over at your spouse and say, hey, hon, that's a really pretty sunset. And your spouse, oh yeah, that's a nice sunset. But if you say, hey, that's a lovely sunset, and you just ignored, and it goes over and over and over, they can tell within, I think, minutes if that couple's going to last. Like, they've done research on it. And again, it's creating intentional time to connect. Why do marriages fail after years and years and then kids come along? Because the marriage gets put on the back burner. So I will say this is controversial that I say, but I'm going to say it, that people, think like, put the kids first. No, I'm sorry. You got to put the marriage first because the marriage is the foundation for those kids. And if the marriage dissolves, you've lost your foundation for your kids. But yeah, I mean, I am shocked at the shit that comes back when you say put the marriage first. Now I say put yourself first and then put the marriage. And then, and again, your kids have needs. I get that. But you have to like make sure that marriage is like functioning like a well-oiled machine, that it is like running perfectly smoothly, that y'all are like, but so many people, what is the first thing they do? They put all their kids' activities on the calendar and it's all about the kids. And it really, the first thing should be that marriage meeting or that family meeting and those, date nights. Date nights, again, super simple, but super effective because you are making intentional time to reconnect with your partner. You got to have that.
You are not going to find anybody on this side of the screen disagreeing. I agree with you 100%. Yeah. It's kind of like disciplining kids when you have opposing viewpoints. One parent thinks it needs to go this way. The other parent thinks it needs to go this way. The kid can't see you disagree because they're going to pounce on that. You almost have to take that disagreement to the side and collaborate a little bit, or else you're basically laying the foundation of conflict in front of the child as well. And you're bringing them into the conflict.
And you're giving them power. You're giving them power to go, ooh, look at that. I know how to put a little tiff between mommy and daddy. That was super fun. So, and can we give our kids like a voice and power in like healthy, acceptable ways rather than, manipulating their parents? And definitely. And I mean, I am so thankful that my ex and his wife and the four of us have a good relationship, because my teen would be eating that up. And she tries it all the time. I'm really shocked. And I just laugh. I talk to your dad like every day, and he knows you're full of shit. Like, what are you doing? Like, this is so funny. I feel sorry for those parents that don't have that relationship, but I would advise those parents that don't have that relationship, please don't take what your child says as the gospel truth. Assume the best of your ex-partner. Just make that assumption going out the gate and then get all the facts and then talk through it or figure it out. But I mean, look, I've made mistakes. My exes make mistakes. Like, we all make mistakes, but we assume that they're doing the best they can and that we're all doing the best that we can. But we're going to make mistakes. Nobody's perfect, you know?
Very sound advice. Very sound.
Yeah, that's a hard one. I'm always surprised at how many people, like, their first instinct is to jump on their ex, and then it just gives them like a tally mark on like how horrible their ex is. They're, you know, she's such a horrible mother. Look at this, and she did this and this and this, rather than looking at all the great stuff and all the good stuff. And again, I think maybe because I live that as a philosophy of my life, I assume the best of everyone, everything, like that everyone's doing the best they can at all times. And so if we can just make that a philosophy in life, like, the world would just be a much better place.
Absolutely. So we're knee deep in the holiday season. It doesn't matter if somebody's listening to this 1 year from now, 6 months from now, but just keeping things timely for the sake of discussion.
Okay.
What are a couple of strategies that can make divorce tolerable through the holiday season?
Okay. Love this. I'm doing some writing about that, posting some content on that on all my social media. And I think the first step is just acceptance. Accept that things are different. Accept that the life that you had before, and that's like a big thing. Like, you got to let go, and you have to, you know, get the closure, get the emotional closure, and gain the acceptance so that you can be present. You can't bring that past and bring that bitterness and that negative energy into this time with your kids, or you're going to regret it. So let go of the past and focus on being present, and create new traditions. This is an opportunity to create new traditions with your children. So don't look at like problems as, you know, horrible things. Look at it as a challenge, as a setback, as a way to like, how can I solve this? So like, okay, you're not going to be with your kids on Christmas Day where you've been to Nana's house for the last 10 years. And I know it sucks, but what's something new you can do? What's a new tradition that you can create, or what's a new way of looking at it? And that's the other thing people forget. Like, your kid is not looking at the calendar and go, well, we didn't go to Nana's on the 25th. It's just about that experience. You know, if they go on the 21st, who cares, you know? So letting go of that date on the calendar is a big part of it. And your self-care, you know, you got to up the self-care. I should explain like what self-care is, because I think that's another overused term. People think it's bubble baths and reading. And I'm like, for me, it's bumping up my meditation, or I might, you know, implement some EFT tapping if my anxiety is high, and workouts. Like, you do not mess with my workouts, because when mom sweats, kids are happy, you know, like, right. So, you know, make sure you've got healthy habits, healthy meals, like make sure you're taking care of your body, taking care of your mind, take some breaks. Don't say yes if you can't handle it. And I think that's another thing, building some boundaries, set out some non-negotiables. You know what? I'm not taking on that project that I do every year because I'm just dealing with too much emotional crap, and that's okay. And then reach out for support. It's okay to know that this is a difficult time. I don't think really people understand. You and I have been through it, Mike, but the person who has not been through divorce does not really understand the amount of grief that people go through when they're going through divorce. And you're not just grieving the knowns, like the loss of your marriage and the loss of time with your kids, but what about the unknowns? Like, what's my financial status going to be? Or do I have to go get a new career? Or where am I going to live? I mean, those are huge questions and huge anxiety-filled things. So I think reaching out for support and putting up boundaries and you know, doing that self-care and doing what's best for you and your kids right now is really the thing. And listen, it's okay to be sad. It's okay. And it's okay to be sad even when you make the right decisions. Sometimes that's a part of it. You have to know, like, you know, things are different. I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling lonely, but I know that I'm going to be okay in the end. And it's okay.
For transparency's sake, That first Christmas I went through as I was going through divorce was incredibly challenging. I remember Christmas Eve in particular. I was living with one of my friends. Here we are in our mid-30s and we're roommates, which is almost humiliating in and of itself.
Yeah,
it was just for a short period of time. But I remember Christmas Eve where I got pretty low and he ended up having to call a bunch of our friends over. We ended up kind of having an impromptu Christmas Eve party. But, I got through it. And one of the things that I can say about my divorce and how I learned how to cope was accepting that I had 3 compartmentalized different versions of my personality. There was the part of me that was mourning the loss of my marriage and was really distraught about it. There was a second side of my personality that was kind of like the Loki, like the mischief maker, that was kind of like, okay, I'm free, I'm this, I'm that, and honestly, there was some irrational decision making made during that when that personality would rear his ugly head.
Yes.
And then there was the focused me, the guy that was he was sad, but he was coming to terms with it. And, I wouldn't say I was necessarily optimistic as much as I was just accepting of every day. Every day was a new day. This is my new normal. That's a term I hate since COVID, by the way. This is my new normal, right? Eventually, those 3 personalities merged into the person that, you're talking to right now. I still have a little bit of that craziness, but that's what makes me fun. I still have that sense of focus, and that's what makes me successful. And I still have that part of me that kind of mourns certain decisions that have happened in my past and accepted my role in those bad decisions. And I think that's part of where the healing process has taken place.
Yes, I love that. I love how you articulated that. I think a lot of men, and I think because men are like conditioned a little bit different, so I'm generalizing a little bit here, but I think that's why men can continue to function, because I think they've been conditioned to like put aside the emotions and just get in that game and like, don't care if you're hurt, you just play through it. And so they've kind of been conditioned to like play through or work through or just compartmentalize things more so than women. And I think it's more socially acceptable for a woman, for example, to cry at work, and so some of that personal stuff can bleed into the professional stuff. But if a man did that, holy shit, can you imagine?
Right.
So,
yeah.
and so that's where I see like the biggest distinction, because I have a women's group and a men's group on Facebook, and like the men just come to that group and like, I have to take breaks because the pain is palpable because they don't have an outlet. And I think because they compartmentalize things, they go to work, but like deep inside, like their anxiety. And so they come to me and, we work through that. But I definitely think that like the men just don't have that like support. It's not like, and so for them to pour their hearts out to other men who understand, hey, I'm just honored that I get to like witness that and just see that and see the beauty of it. That's why I kind of like spread the message that this is very hurtful for men. And we just don't see it, and so I don't know. I want men to get that support. I'm glad you had that support and that you had someone to lean on, but I think a lot of men don't. I think their families don't really understand. Again, if you don't know anyone, that's going through divorce and they're looking at you like, what the hell's wrong with you? It's, they think it's like a breakup, and I'm like, oh my God, you're losing everything. Like you're losing like your children, your home, your finances. It's like, it's so devastating. So it's, so interesting that you talked about that compartmentalization and then blending it together. And like, again, it's about moving forward and being able to use that in a way that makes you a better person. That's really the beauty of it. Like, how can I come through this? And what did I learn from it? What did I gain from it? And how can I use this to help others? That's the other thing too.
Yeah, for sure. And that was, that's part of that journey for me. Was, I would say, the most pivotal moment was whenever I recognized that, because it's my divorce multiple personality disorder, and any one of those personalities could rear its ugly head at any moment in time. And once I actually recognized that within myself, I was able to work on those things individually, and how I dealt with those things, how I presented myself to my kids, how I presented myself to my peers, my coworkers, my subordinates. I lead people for a living. So it's really crazy. And whenever I have friends come to me and talk to me about their divorce, I share that. That's the very first thing that I share is like, okay, here's the thing. I can't speak on your behalf because I'm not you, but this is what happened with me. I had 3 different types of personality that would just rear its head any day. And I didn't know which guy I was going to wake up being any given day, but I figured out how to navigate it, and you will too.
Yes. And we all have our own coping mechanisms, and we all have our own, but I think that's the key, but that is the key for you. And that's the key for like people who are going through this, is identifying your patterns and reconciling those patterns to make it into a healthy pattern, recognizing where it's showing up for you and where it's constructive versus destructive, right? Like that playful might be good on air with guests and with kids. Not so much spending money.
Right, exactly. And that's exactly where we go. Yeah, absolutely. Well, Terrie, I appreciate you doing the show. Where can they find you online?
Okay. I'd love to have everyone, you can follow me on Instagram at Vanover Terrie, or I have a men's support group, and that's on Facebook. So it's Thrive After Divorce by Terrie Vanover. And then for women, it's Women Thriving After Divorce. So it's easy. Thrive, just hear my long I and you got it. Thrive After Divorce. So you can search those, and that's the best way to find me. I've got lots of free courses, resources, books, stuff that can help people get through this process better.
Man, I really appreciate you doing the show. This was a lot of fun. I think we could probably keep going all night and bounce ideas back and forth. So we're going to have to do this again. I want to once again thank Terrie Vanover for being on the show today. You can find her at choosingtorise.com. You could also search her out through all forms of social media by looking her up by name, Terrie Vanover. If you are going through a divorce or a hard time right now, make sure you reach out and talk to somebody. You do not have to go through this alone. Hey friends, I hope you can find time to give me a like, follow, subscribe on all forms of social media, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and Facebook. Share this show with your friends because we have plenty of new and exciting things happening for 2022. I would also appreciate that 5-star rating on the Apple Podcast app. It helps push this podcast to the top of the search queue. This has been Caught on the Mic with Michael Clark. I'm Michael Clark. Until next time, thank you.